Well, I'm very excited today because today we're going to start getting into the real heart of Romans. And we'll be starting in verse 16. Paul says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes, for the Jew first, and also for the Greek." Here's a question for you. Why does Paul even mention being ashamed? Like, why does he bring that up? I mean, when I introduce myself, I don't say, "Hey, I'm Josh, and I'm not ashamed of being a pastor," because that would be weird. And so why does Paul even bring it up in the conversation here? Well, context is everything, because at this point in Paul's life, everywhere that Paul goes, he is mocked, he is ridiculed, he is persecuted. On one side, you have the Jews who thought that the whole idea of Jesus being the Messiah was just pure blasphemy, just like Paul did once upon a time. And on the other side, you have the very sophisticated Greeks, the thinkers, who considered the idea of anyone being raised from the dead to be just utter nonsense, stupidity, and couldn't even take Paul seriously. And besides that, Paul's life was in constant danger and trouble because of this gospel that he was preaching. Listen to Paul's own words in 1 Corinthians 4. He says, "To the present hour we both hunger and thirst. We are poorly clothed and beaten and homeless. And we labor working with our own hands. Being reviled, we bless. Being persecuted, we endure. Being defamed, we entreat. We have been made as the filth of the world, the offscoring of all things until now." And the New Living Translation says, "We are treated like the world's garbage, like everybody's trash." Doesn't sound too victorious. In fact, it sounds a little bit like you're on the losing team. And maybe if you knew Paul personally, you might ask behind closed doors, "Hey, Paul, don't you ever feel like you're on the losing team here? I mean, God lets you down, man. Here you are preaching the gospel and people are just treating you like garbage. Doesn't it bother you? I mean, doesn't it kind of make you sad or a little bit ashamed to be out there talking about something that nobody appreciates?" And it's at this point in the text that Paul drives a huge stake in the ground, and he makes it very, very clear. He says, "Hey, let me tell all of you, because I know you're all thinking it. The answer to your question is no. I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. Yeah, I'm often in chains, beaten and hungry, and cast out for the sake of the gospel, but I am not ashamed of it." Well, Paul, how can you say that? Surely you're at least a little bit timid, a little bit ashamed. And Paul says, "No, I'm not. And I'll tell you why." And the next part of the verse gives the reason. "For the gospel is the power of God for salvation for everyone who believes, for the Jew first and also for the Greek." The word power here, it comes from a Greek word, dunamis. And it's where we get our word dynamite. And it has this idea of being an overwhelming force, a violent kind of nuclear blast. Once that thing goes off, it is going to do what it set out to do. It's so powerful that it just cannot be stopped. It will absolutely accomplish its purpose. What does Paul say the purpose of the gospel is? Well, he says the gospel is the power of God for what? Salvation. So what does that mean? Let's try to illustrate it. When you trust in this gospel message, it's like you're on a train called the gospel. If you can imagine this. And this train called the gospel is racing at 1,000 miles an hour. It's going towards salvation. That's the destination. And it's not about to be stopped by anything, not by devils, not by circumstances, not the coronavirus, not your mother-in-law or somebody that you don't like. It's racing to a destination called salvation. Now, salvation, it's not just about avoiding hell. Salvation means complete and total victory. It's a destiny of unimaginable joy, happiness beyond our wildest imaginations, a life of purpose where we will literally rule and reign with Christ Himself. And we'll get to that later. And on that day, there will be no doubt that we're on the winning team. Always, always remember that. In the end, we win, regardless of what happens down here or how much shame may be heaped on you. And sometimes it happens, sometimes life will just kick you in the gut. But it can come all at once. Let it come. Because in the end, we win. And the truth is, the game is fixed in your favor. You go to the back of the book, you go read Revelation, God has already written in the ending. And you know what it says? It says we win. We come out on top. And you see kind of a foreshadow of this in the life of Jesus, don't we? His earthly life was marked in many ways by a kind of shame. Born into scandal because his mom wasn't married when he was conceived. And at his death, shame was heaped on him. Beard pulled out, people mocking him. Save yourself if you're so powerful. But if you remember the story, 3 days later, the tomb was empty. No more pain, no more tears, just total victory. Victory over death, victory over shame, victory over sorrow. Well, how did that happen? Well, the game was already fixed in his favor. The whole time, God was working behind the scenes like an explosive force, making sure that what He intended to happen, happened. Total salvation. The game was fixed in His favor. And if you believe in Christ, then what I want to tell you today is that the game is fixed in your favor. No demon, no circumstance, no hurt, no trauma, nothing can derail what God has purposed for you. It will come to pass. So regardless of what's going on, I can say, no, I'm not ashamed of this gospel, because this gospel, I believe that it has the power of God, that God will accomplish the thing that He began. The game is fixed in my favor. I'll see you next time.